Were they given a copy of the performance?
I do not.
Okay.
I would think no.
Okay. Yes. Huh? Well, they would be the loans that we have out. We've got some housing loans that are out there, and that would be the revenue that we are planning to go out for bonds. Any ad valorem money that we're getting in, those would all be considered loans that we receive money for. So it's interest and loans receivable. It'd be interest and loans receivable.
Spreadsheet. Do you bring Marty's spreadsheet?
No, I don't have Marty's spreadsheet. Let me run down there.
So I can combine those.
Okay.
Is that how much time?
Mr. Clay, going home, are you?
Hey, how are you, sir?
I don't usually call you that, John.
Hey, how you doing? So here's,
Down here, she did not add the $1.65 in here for the water wastewater department service. I put it in.
okay. Well, that should have been, she should have
This is
added
the
that
discount.
in.
This is senior disability discount.
Okay.
So that might not be applicable, if that's the discount. Right?
Okay, yeah. Well, no, that's still,
the bill, right?
that's, they still, my understanding, they get just a discount off of the bill, so if we were to charge $1.65 for that, they would pay whatever the discounted rate would be on that $1.65.
What's the discount? 10%?
I think so.
Hey, do you know if the discount's 10% on the senior citizens bills?
I'd have to look at the code. I don't know what it is offhand.
Because I can go back and change it. 10%
And
was 16.5.
I talked to her, and I told her that we needed to probably add that in up here on, well,
She did add it.
she made it, okay, she added it in there.
And in there,
Okay.
but there.
Just missed it there.
I added that in, but it should be a discount.
Right.
Because I need to go and fix it real quick if we can.
Sorry, I don't remember where it is.
It's 10%, I think.
I think you're right. That's
Let me
what
go
sticks
fix it
out in my
real quick.
head.
Let me go fix it real quick.
It's supposed to be mine. I don't know.
How much copying did you do that?
Very little.
Okay.
It's according to the charter, the city manager.
I understand.
I get the vibe you don't want.
Yeah,
I get the vibe you don't want.
I do too. We'll see. We'll see how that works.
There we are, right there.
Yeah, is that it?
I'm gonna sit down here on the end, quick escape. Councilman Morgan will stick his leg out and treat me.
When that turns green, if y'all need a click or anything, the corner's right here.
Okay.
Very top.
All right.
If you want to advance something, that's back, that's forward, that's backwards.
All right.
It'll vibrate in your hand.
Okay.
When it's like that, it's off. When you
All
put it back and it'll vibrate in your hand, it's on.
Cool deal.
Okay.
You got it. Wonder.
Oh, that's the corner.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if this is a great big deal. Need to point. They're gonna have it. They're gonna live. They can't see it if I point it at them up there.
Log in and pull up the
Emailed it to Tracy.
computer
Okay.
No, he's gonna log in. And then just pull it up. Does that work? We don't have that SunDrive.
I emailed it to you, but it was, yeah, it was just a few minutes ago when I'd wrapped it up.
Okay, so this is $1.49.
Okay.
Only made 12 copies, so that's
Oh,
we'll see if they want them.
I
have to shut the park at
I don't know how I got to where, I don't know how I got that.
Park at lunch, that has people behind that curve. We should have made them fill it in. I mean, when they built that curve.
I told them I wanted it done by Wednesday.
Yeah. No, I mean, we should have made the contract
You need to sit there?
in the first place.
can we move the computer down?
They're checking on the availability of that
Which way the computer
crushed
down
granite
there?
stuff.
We
I
can move the computer
said, worst
down
case
there.
scenario,
So,
we can
Kristen,
get some
can
dirt
you-
in there and fill it up
Sand?
part way,
Yeah.
pack, it's gotta be tamped down, and then we need to come back in. Once we get it filled up part way, we could put some rock in.
Yeah.
And then come back over the top of that with
Yeah.
some of that granite, and it'll fill in around the rocks.
Yeah.
It'll make it like concrete,
I will. But it's not, it's about yay wide and about yay
but it's
deep.
an ankle breaker.
Yeah, it's bad, but I mean, it doesn't take that much material.
It shouldn't take that.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. It
It
should have been
won't allow me to
backfilled. I
log
can't
in
believe we
under my-
accepted it without backfilling that thing. So are we going to go through this today, too?
There you go.
I haven't actually changed mine.
Oh, I didn't think about changing that.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, it ain't no more. It ain't no more. You got everything? Y'all ready?
Yeah.
We're not ready. Quite ready yet. So you got a microphone too? Y'all got a microphone? Everybody's got a microphone?
I didn't say nothing.
Turn
though.
mine off.
Yeah, you gotta talk. Don't be giving me that.
I'm more than willing to turn my microphone off.
You can put this in my face all you want. I ain't saying a word.
You know, this part I'm not sure about, but I did adjust it down to $1.49.
Yeah.
From $1.65. Okay, I took off 10%. Okay.
And, what we're gonna be, the water portion.
Revenue.
would be
Well-
a $6, basically a $6 increase.
That's under 7. That's
Right.
under 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, 549.
You know what the heck this
Gotcha,
one is?
Gotcha.
Yeah, that would
So-
be the increase. 77. The increase would be $6.77. $80 would be an increase in 933. So it's to the right.
Yeah, okay.
So the total bill increase,
Well, it's right there. It'll be 8032. That is the increase.
yeah, but if all bills to, never mind, got you now. It's based on the gallons.
Here's a case they ask a utility bill question. Here's a case that's a utility bill question. And I'll hand these out if they ask, okay?
All right.
I gotta get set up. I'm not even ready to start. Okay.
we've got some more council members on their way, so we're just going to wait a few minutes.
We're in no hurry, unless you are in a hurry. We're in no hurry unless you're in a hurry.
This is the presentation.
Yeah.
I try to have electronic stuff.
Yeah. Well, I just I didn't have it all put together where I could do it easily.
Do you know what unrestricted net position is?
Nope. I'm gonna learn some stuff today.
Yes, sir.
We had like 30 seconds here. What exactly is unrestricted net position?
That is our ability to respond in case of an emergency. Tornado comes in, wipes out town. We've got no revenues coming in. What is our ability to respond and take care of the problems and operate the city? So here, we went from nearly zero. That increased down to 35% in 2018. No, 53%.
That's
53%, yeah. And then it starts moving up here.
But is negative good or bad?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call this special council meeting to order. Please stand for the invocation by Reverend Charles Barnett and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for what you're doing in this place. And Father, we're at this time where we have the budget again, Father. And before we ask anything, Father, you know what we're in need of. And we thank you that you love us and that we love you the same way back, Father. And so, Father, give us wisdom and knowledge for this day, that we don't worry about tomorrow, but for this day, Father. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you, Charles, and please call the roll.
Hankins. Harris. Chapman. Burke. Hampton. Fortenbaugh. Johnson. Warren.
And the quorum is established. Business item number 1, consider the fiscal year 2023 City of Lawton proposed operating and capital preliminary budgets and take appropriate action if necessary to include making amendments to the preliminary budget to be incorporated in the final budget that council considers. Michael.
Mayor, Mayor.
Is it good, Charles?
It's green.
Okay, all right, now it's a little better. Okay. I usually don't have to get too loud, but Mayor, thank you for gathering everyone together for us to present the FY23 fiscal budget for consideration by the council. I would like to say that we have been through a tumultuous couple of past years, right? Beginning in, what was it, April, May of 19 until now, we've experienced a lot of the ups and downs along with the pandemic. And through all of that, our staff has done a very good job in administering their budgets and adhering to the requirements therefore, and really putting us in a position where we can make some of these recommendations. Now, that's not to all say that it's all fair and well, and that there are not going to be some difficult conversations that we're going to have. But I think staff has done a very good job. All of our directors have stayed within their budgetary guidelines. They have expended what they need to expend and no more, so they are very good stewards of the taxpayers' money. However, as we've experienced this past year, inflation is starting to gain steam. It's already at 8.5% or 9%. Joe Don will tell me exactly what that is. When we established the budget, we started with 7.5%, but now it's already eclipsed that. So we'll be talking about everything from the CPI increases and inflation to wage inflation and a number of other things that we found as we go through the budget. Now, we will do this budget this year a little differently than we've done them in the past. We've tried to get to this point where we talk about budget in a number of areas, Mayor and Council, where we talk about today revenues, that will be fees and other proposed revenues. Then we'll look at personnel and operations / maintenance. And then on May the 6th, we'll look at capital improvement and capital outlay. We hope to have that budget established and finalized. Right now we're working with Garver to try to get that proposal that we talked about last year in place and ready to speak about. And then we'll do some summary and wrap up and any recommended changes. Hopefully we'll have that adoption at some point before our statutory guidelines, and that will get us to our FY23 budget. So with that, we can start. Joe Don, you want to start with the budget?
Sure. I wished I was delivering better news than what I think I'll be delivering today, but this is kind of what I've seen as I've been here and gone through the finances and the audits that we've had done in the past. One of the first things I'd like to refer to comes out of the performator that Crawford & Associates does for the city of Lawton every year. This is the performator for 2020. We do not have the one for 2021 yet, but I expect that it will be very, very similar. The first thing I'd like to discuss with you is just our level of unrestricted net position. And to explain a little bit what that is, unrestricted net position is an indication of the amount of unexpended and available resources the city has at a point in time to fund emergencies. So a snapshot every year at June 30 of our ability to fund an emergency should it happen. If a tornado comes in and wipes out part of Lawton, how are we going to be able to respond to that? We would expect that we would have between 30 and 50% of a net position to fund emergencies. We do not. We have not had that since 2014. 2014, we were about at zero. It got progressively worse to 2018 at about a negative 53%. Now, since 2018, we've been making strides to improve that. It is the negative number has been reduced every year. It's gone from 53 to 40 to 35. So we're chipping away at it a little bit every year, which is a good thing, but it's still a negative number. And this negative number would include things like the $40 million unfunded pension we have, the unfunded health care, the shortage in health care that we've had in the past, and things like that. The next thing I'd like for you to look... Yes, sir.
So you're telling me that in 2014, we didn't have unfunded pension?
No, I'm telling you we had an unfunded pension in 2014, but our total net unrestricted funds was at zero, or thereabouts. It was a negative 1.3%, where it should have been 30 to 50. To the positive, yes. But no, we still had that liability there. It's been ongoing for a lot of years. And it's growing at about $200,000 a year based on the way we've been funding it. If we continue to fund it the way we've funded in the past, that number's growing at about $200,000 a year.
Joe, I think, and I'll stand to be corrected, I'll get this information to be exact, but I believe the law changed somewhere in this time frame that required us to report that from a federal perspective. So what you didn't see before was not a need to report it, and now I think starting in 15, or right around in that time frame, we had to start reporting those unfunded liabilities, so to speak. So it looks as though we didn't know. Well, it just wasn't, we weren't required. And if you look back on our unfunded pensions, for example, in the general fund, speaking with our auditor, Frank Crawford, he went back as far as 2011, and we were unfunding our pension from that point forward. Speaking with some of our senior staff that's been here, it goes back to the 90s, if I can get that verified. So it's not that it's been this new thing that's going on, but when we fund the pension, we need to fund it at 100% of the pension. And for example, that year, and since this is a big number and we're talking about this negative unrestricted net position, would be another $1.5 million expenditure to fund our pension at 100% of what our actuarials say that we should be funding it. That draws down that fund balance that we'll talk about on another slide. So just to put that in perspective, I don't believe financially we were required to report that until until 15 or 16, somewhere in that neighborhood. 15, I think it was.
I just had a question for clarification for those that are watching. So from 2014 to 2015, that negative that started was just because of the pension and the medical, or are these other things that cause that?
Those two categories would be the primary categories that caused us angst. If you remember, what was it, 2 years ago, Dwayne, we got out of the self-funded healthcare business, right? One of the things, and we'll get to that in a minute, that what happened, even though we funded the shortfall for that particular year that we got out of it, and I don't remember the exact year, but I know it's been one of the past couple of years, we funded that year. But there's what they call a run out, and that run out continued to accumulate because they were still submitting bills to the city to be repaid. Well, that came in at another $2+ million.
$2.173 million.
$2.173 million. So there was another year of an accumulated total for that payout. Now, once we pay that, which will draw our unrestricted fund balance down a little bit more, once we pay that, that will be off of our books. But the shortage or the shortfall in the pension calculations, at least for the general funded employees, will have to be made up. And even if we make it whole, say at whatever the payment is, I think it's a little over $3 million a year, if we made that every year, we would each inch up maybe 1% or so every year. So it would take us 40 years to get to that point where we're 100%. Now, council's asked us to go back and look at some proposals on how do we do that. We're having those conversations now with OKMRF, with our actuarials, which will be here on Thursday, and also with our auditors and one of our financial auditors in that regard. So we're working towards solutions for that, but the bottom line is the longer we delay funding at 100%, the worse it will get. And if we don't, it'll continue to add a couple $100,000 to it every year. Now, in 2011, for example, which is as far back as our auditor could go with specific numbers, it was in the $900,000 range. Now today, we're in the 1.5-ish, $1.6 million range. So the point of this unrestricted net fund balance, and you see how it's been adjusted or it came down, was because we've gone into those. Now, this doesn't put us in a negative financial position if you look at the performance. Matter of fact, we have a very good financial position overall, but this is one of the things that they tell you should look at, which are those unfunded liabilities that come with pension systems. And that's what we got to pay attention on those things. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. A, we know it. B, we're working on a solution, and we'll have something to bring back to you as soon as we have a solid solution.
Yeah. I just had to extend that a little bit. So there are more than just these two, but the two are the medical and the pension are the two main ones, the two big ones.
I'd have to ask Joe, but I think that makes up for.
But there is a list of others.
That makes up the lion's share of the shortage that we're in. That makes up this shortage in fund balance.
Yeah, is there a list of? Do you have a list of all of those anywhere by any chance?
I can have a list. I don't have a list here in front of me tonight.
Okay,
but I could get a list of them on where we're at. But the two major ones are going to be the pension and the health care that we've got. There's probably some other smaller areas that would make that up, but not near to the degree that we're looking at on these two.
Right. And we're taking some actions, Michael, to try to decrease those, I think.
That's correct. This year, in this year's budget, we have budgeted to cover the entire run out of the health care fund. That will be covered after the end of this year. But when we get to the next slide, I'll show you what that does to the slide, or will do to the slide. That will impact our fund position in another way, and we'll see that slide. And we're also budgeting for 100% of the premiums for our general fund pension system. So we've taken steps to cover that. But that comes with, let me back up a little bit. We knew that we had some problems with our pension system, which we've been working through for the past couple of years. We also knew that it was very lean years, right? And we needed to have as much capital as we had available at the time. So we worked through all those lean years. We paid as much as we could into those pension systems, but now we're kind of easing out of that pandemic. Doesn't look like it with the inflation, but we're easing out of that pandemic, and we need to get back to the point of addressing these issues. So we've done both of those things in this budget. Richard, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, and Joe Don, you jump in there, I'll jump in here however we work this. Okay, so if you move to the next slide, which should be in front of you, which is the general fund unassigned fund balance, and Joe's got that information, which is really a level of budgetary unassigned fund balance, is an indication of the amount of unexpended, unencumbered, and available resources in the city's general fund, and it has at a point in time to carry over to the next fiscal year to fund budgetary emergencies, shortfalls, or other unexpended needs. In this analysis, the general fund's unassigned fund balance is considered along with any unassigned fund balance deficit of the city's other governmental funds in this model. 10%, and this is critical, is considered the minimum responsible level, while 30% is considered desirable. And if you look at this graph here, we're right about 15%. So we're halfway between where we probably should be closer to the 30. We're edging towards the 10%. And whatever decisions we make in the budget, if we pull from the unassigned fund balance or draw that down, and some of those things that we talked about before, Mr. Hampton, and since you asked the question, where does that shortfall coverage come from for the health care payout and for the employee pension? It comes out of this unassigned fund balance. So it will draw it down a little bit. We won't see it in this graph, but it'll draw it down % or 2. I'd have to get the exact numbers, but it will draw it down. So we're drawing it down knowingly that we need to cover these categorical areas, but it is drawing it down slightly. Does that cover it, Joe?
That covers it.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next slide unless we have questions on that slide. Financial concerns on July the 1st as of 2022. One is, we've already talked about that negative unrestricted net position and the flat unassigned fund balance. And we move into what we talked about before, that negative balance in the healthcare fund. As I said before, that was the run out from the year because those bills still came in and we still had to pay those. Even though we moved into a fully funded healthcare pension, those still came in on the old one and we had to pay those. Now, in the first year that we transitioned over, we covered the shortfall out of the general fund again. It wasn't as much, but we made that coverage. And then this came in even after that. So those continue to trickle in and we have to pay those. So that is a portion that really decreases our fund balance as we talked about earlier. And then the unfunded non-uniform employee pension plan of roughly $40 million. I know that sounds disturbing, right? That's a big, large number, and it is a big, large number. But it didn't happen overnight, and this has been happening for quite a number of years. It's not like it happened in the last 2 or 3 years. This has been probably 10, 15, maybe 20 years in the making, and I'd have to go back and get the numbers, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus or make any acquisitions because I don't know, but we need to go back and find out exactly when we started moving into a negative. And the last I talked to Rusty, who I trust explicitly, last time he believes we were funded, Rusty Wiesenhunt, was about 1998, that we were funded 100%. Now, if somebody knows something that I don't know, I'm open to hearing that information, but that's the numbers that I have right now. And I will verify them, but that's what I got. So that puts us at a $40 million deficit as far as funding it at 100%. And when you go back to the unfunded liabilities, which reduces that net effective position that we saw on the first slide, this is one of the big ones because this is a huge impact to it, and you now have to declare it according to the federal government. So, because that's a liability, and what happened in a lot of states and a lot of other areas, such as California, their pension system's gotten in really bad shape, and then the next thing you know, they don't have enough to fund their pension system, so the government said you have to start disclosing that. So that's why it's on there, and that's why you started seeing that decrease. But it's $40 million today. Now that's according to my conversations with Frank Crawford. He said, Michael, to get it where you need to be, you need to add up $40 million to it. Now how do we do that? Well, that's the question that we're exploring right now, and I don't have a solid answer for you, but we've explored a number of areas. A, can we borrow the money? Don't know. We'll check on that. And if we borrow the money, can we invest that money minus the amount of money that we need to pay the premium if we could do that? And then we also have to make sure we pay our premiums at the 100% rate, even if we do that. So there's a few things that we got to do if we want to get to the 100%. I'm a big fan of getting out of the pension business because we're not experts in that. Neither are we experts in the healthcare business, so we'd rather have somebody else manage that and we make the appropriate payments to it. So that's the direction we're moving to, and that's the direction Council asked us to move to in one of our recent meetings. So that's what we're doing, and we'll have some more information you in the future, but we wanted to make sure you're aware of where we are in that regard. Now, I know those are really hard to swallow numbers, but I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't tell you that's where we were. All right.
Michael?
Sir.
As I recall in that meeting we had previously, I thought that number was 14 million.
No, I'm sorry, but that's not accurate. I don't know where the number came from, But to get to 80% of where we are right now, that would be another 32 million. So it's closer to 40 million to get us to 100%. It is 40 million to get us to 100%. I will get the exact numbers because our actuarials will be here on Thursday for our pension meeting, and we'll have much better numbers. So our next budget meeting, I can have some updates for the numbers for you exactly, but I wanted you to be aware of how we went into this budget meeting. Now, when we're doing this budget right now in a little different way, and we're looking at it from the 100,000-foot view, so to speak. We're looking at revenues and the gross macro level. And we'll look at some expenditures in that macro level, but we wanted you to see some of the concerns that we had going into the budget and how we adjusted it. And I can't give any more credit to Joe Don and Kristen than I already have, and the accolades that could apply to them. But Joe Don to walk in here and past 3 or 4 months like he has and get a handle on this budget like he has speaks a lot for his character. And then for Kristen to be continually working through our upgrade through Tyler and plugging those numbers in while changing our whole financial system over so we can have better accountability, I can't speak highly enough of them. And then when it comes to my 2 deputy city managers, making sure they manage their departments and their divisions that they have direct supervisory response over, and then in turn their directors, I just can't speak highly enough of them. They've done a heck of a job working with a little bit and doing a lot. So I don't want it to paint us like it's so bleak. They've done a great job, and we would be much worse if it wasn't for their efforts. So if you look at this mix here, you can see the majority of our revenue comes from 2 sources, and that's sales tax, use tax, we'll call that taxes, right, because they're combined here, and then charges for services. So 40% for one and 28% for the other, which accommodates for about 30%. Then there's other miscellaneous revenue, about 19%, some interest on loans, very little on animal welfare and grants, parks, license and permits, and fines and forfeitures. So you can see there's very little in those areas. Any questions on that particular slide? So it's just a demographic of where our majority of our revenue comes through. So the market comes out of yes, charges for services, correct. Okay. If you move to the next slide, where it breaks out a little bit more, and this is where I'll probably have to have Joe Don and Kristen help me out here, but you can see in FY20, if we start with taxes and go down, we were at $60,366,356. Our actual revenues for FY21 were $67,456,764. Our projected revenues for this year are $72,377,256. Now that sounds great, right? That represents about a 2.85% or so increase in sales tax. However, when you start looking at the inflation factor, and you erode that by 9.5% or 10%, somewhere in that neighborhood, wherever we end up here in the next month or so, you can see that it starts to eat away with those. And Mayor, you recall when you and I went to D.C. and some of our other representatives from the community went to D.C., the Department of Defense presented a budget, and I'll just use $100 million for a number, but they presented a budget. It was $100 million, and they drew a diagonal line across there, and they said, this is $100 million. $100 million is still $100 million. This is only for examples. This is not what we're talking about. However, if inflation's at 10%, then your purchasing power is, relatively speaking, $90 million. So from their perspective, from the DOD perspective, and this is the reason we mentioned some of this stuff, they saw a cut in their budget, meaning they're not $100 million, but only buy $90 million worth of product. And we've been dealing with that, if you recall, in some of our conversations in the past about the reverb count, for example, and how we had a certain amount for that, and how we hadn't increased it in so many years, and that really eroded our purchasing power. So here we are with that one. For charge and services, you have $42,961,638 in FY20. The actuals were for 21 was 45,741. For projected for 22 is 49,543. And for 2023, with the CPI of 7.5%, you're looking at 52. And even with the CPI, between what our projected revenues are and the CPI included, I think that's right around 2.5%, maybe 3% at the best of an increase with the CPI included. Fines and forfeitures, you can see in 2020 were $4 million. In 2021, they were $5.3 million. Now you have seen a drop off in these projected revenues, and that's really due primarily to our transition to our new court software. We've had to work out some bugs and some issues. So we're not able to process those as rapidly and as quickly as we should be. We are working through those issues. Dwayne's well aware of that, along with Julian, our court director, and they're working with our software representative to solve those issues. License and permits is 742. 2021 was 687. Again, we see a slight decrease in this because of some of the transition to our software, but then we pick up again in 2022 with 1.08 million, and we're expecting 1.14 million with the CPI for license and permits. Parks and Rec, very steady across the board, 474. You can see it drops a little bit in 2021, a little bit less than in 22 than it was in 20, but you see it right back up to where we expected it to be from 20 at about 487,000. Grants, 3.174 million. The 12 and 13 million that you see in 20 and 21, don't everybody do a dance. That is our CARES Act money and our ARPA funds. Those are those one-time funds. In 23, we will not see an increase in that categorical area again because we will receive our last tranche of money for ARPA this May. So that's why you'll see a drop off in 2023. Animal welfare, 409,000, 292, 113, and 100. We contribute that to a lot of the pandemic, and also the fact that we've had difficulties acquiring the services of veterinarians so we can push animals into this facility, get them spayed and neutered and adoptable, and move them on out through the system. So that's primarily where we see those occurring. Then you have interest and loans that go across, and they've stayed steady mostly. Miscellaneous revenue, and Joe will have to tell me what is included in miscellaneous revenue, but you can see that was 24, 34, 31, and 36 million respectively, putting us at our total revenues in FY20 of 148 million, 2021 176 million, 22 185 million, and a preliminary estimate with the CPI of 7.5% of 189. So that gets us through our major revenue categorical areas. And on to our inflation prediction.
Michael,
Sir.
I think you said our software is causing us to lose what looks like millions of dollars. Do we have a kind of a know what's going on there and how to fix it?
Yes, it shows a dip in revenue, but that revenue is collectible. And what we've run into is pushing those systems to talk to each other, and we have not been able to do that as successfully as we want. We've made a lot of strides in that. As a matter of fact, Dwayne just spent a couple hours the other day speaking with our staff on that. We believe we have solutions for all those things. That revenue will come in because it's revenue due to the city. We just got to work through the software issues related to it. Now, just because we get software doesn't mean it always comes in and works exactly the way it's supposed to. We do run into issues with interoperability and communication, and even a company like Tyler that does this around the country has issues with some of the software speaking to each other. And also we have to incorporate how we do business here in the city and try to get to the best management practices that they recommend while doing business in the city the way we do business, as long as it meets those best management practices. So hopefully that answers your question, but we will collect on that revenue. Can you briefly explain miscellaneous revenue? Yes, Jordan, can you explain that?
Yes, miscellaneous revenue is going to be things like fees that we collect things for, cemetery, library, stormwater drainage, stormwater mitigation, such contracts that we have for real estate that we may rent out, such as grass leases or things like that. Stormwater mitigation, mainly fees that we receive from across the fund, drainage assessments, sale of other property.
Christine, anything?
So that's pretty much everything that makes up that group, and that's spread across all 35 funds there's so about.
Kristen, you got anything to add to that?
Nothing substantial.
Okay. All right. Mayor, then we move on to the next slide, which is our inflation prediction slide, and this is where we talk about where inflation was in February of 21. You can see that in February of 21, inflation was around 2%. If you recall, January or February of this past year, even 22, mortgage rates were in the 3s or so. But now here we are with inflation creeping up to, if you look on the right-hand side of that graph, if the Fed tightens the inflation and how they handle inflation as far as control of spending and things of that nature, you can see if they tighten it too slowly, we could have a very large inflation factor. If they tighten it very quickly, it may reduce that. But nonetheless, what you're looking at is somewhere in the 10 to 15% predicted, range for inflation. Is that accurate statement, Joe?
Yes, sir. And I will say this about this slide. As the research I've done over inflation and prediction, predicting inflation is a lot like predicting the weather. So, it's very fluid. It's very hard to actually get it right all the time. That's the reason we've got this range. But it is expected the most likely place we're going to end up is somewhere by February of 2023, somewhere between 10 and 15%. We'll be in double digits. I think we'll be in double digits actually before we get to July, the way it's going.
Any questions on inflation? I know we all see it every day. I mean, you go to the store, and I'll use a practical one. We're going to go to the next slide, which talks about current price increases. But you go to the store, and I think chicken's at about 70% increases in prices, and I eat a lot of chicken because I can't eat anything else. So it's gone up dramatically, and that's on the food side. But on what we deal with primarily on our side, you can see here that on equipment maintenance increases and equipment costs, you can see that tires are up 24%, oil 43%, unleaded fuel 53%, and we've had to make some transfers out of our city at large account to cover these costs, which is glad we had it because we're able to cover it right now. Diesel fuel is as much as 67, almost 68%. DEF, which is diesel exhaust fluid, which you have to have to run these new modern trucks, 123%. Vehicles are up 7%, at least for us and the way we purchase them. And refuse carts are $46. So let's just say, a refuse cart was $50 and you're going to add, 46% to the price of the cart. Well, you can see they're starting to get pretty expensive. This is a petroleum-based product mainly. Current prices, again, continued. This is where Rusty keeps killing me on stuff.
Michael,
I almost didn't invite him to this meeting, by the way. So,
yes, sir. It's probably, well, I don't know. I'll leave my opinion to myself on that one. But I was going to ask, these inflation predictions, they match pretty close to the federal predictions?
They come from a federal source, yes, sir.
Okay, that's where you got those?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Okay, thank you.
On to current price increases. When we talk about chemical costs, you can see there that a lot of our chemicals will just drop down to sodium hydroxide, 87%, sulfuric acid, 94%, liquid oxygen, 31%. And John will talk to this one because we've had a lot of contractors contact us about our rock hauling, which we can't continue construction if we don't haul rock, because if we don't haul rock, we can't bed our pipe, we can't lay foundations for streets, foundation for those. Pipes up 111%. Rusty will tell you, and I think he's told you before, what was it, an 8 or 10 inch stick of pipe, Rusty? $64, now it's $145 for a stick. So we got 111% or so increase in that. 10 inch pipes up 73%. So I asked Joe Don to put on here, what does this mean? Because a lot of people's like, yeah, things are going up, what does this mean? Well, with an average increase in chemical cost of 57.1%, because we just averaged those out, if the cost of the city is $100,000 to operate the wastewater treatment plant, and we wish it was $100,000, but if it were, it would now cost us $157,000. So you can see inflation is absolutely burdening our staff's ability to operate. And those things and services that we must provide, like water and wastewater treatment plant, those are governed, and even infrastructure repair is governed by some of the stuff that we're talking about. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Next slide, which will be the FY 2023 revenue summary. With a 7.5% CPI increase, the city can balance the budget, but as we spoke earlier, balancing the budget and drawing down our reserves are two different things. We can budget it, but we're going to do that by drawing down our reserves. We cannot operate in a deficit budget, so to speak, meaning we have to have the money to cover what we're going to expend, but that comes out of those reserve funds that we had available, those unrestricted fund balances that we had available. If we implement a 7% CPI, which was the benchmark in December, really now, as Joe and I spoke earlier, we're already behind a percent and a half, even by using that 7.5 by January or December mark. And then, as Joe Don mentioned earlier, models predict, and Joe Don's exactly right. Inflation is an unpredictable factor, but we can look by the end of it, and everything that I've studied and read says that inflation will continue to increase at least through the end of 2022. So that could put us as high as 15% by January, February of 2023. So I asked Joe Don again to go back and put this in perspective, right? If we increase all the rates by the CPI of 7.5%, this increase will essentially just kick the can a little further down the road. We know that the CPI increase is already at 8.54% from that January or that December-January rating, and will likely be at 10 to 15% before July of 2023. This increase will allow the city to balance the budget, but with the usage of $9.173 million from the city's reserve fund. So we can balance it with a 7.5% increase, but it's still going to cost the city $9 million.
And I would like to say that by balance, that 9.173 does include making the healthcare fund whole, and it includes budgeting for 100% of the employee, the city's portion of the employee pension fund. That doesn't, so that would mean our pension fund doesn't get worse by $200,000, but it won't get any better either over the next year.
Moving on down, if we were to recommend, or we are, asking you guys what your pleasure is, if you were to increase the rate by 10%, this will generate an additional $11.3 million. Now, this additional revenue will circumvent the need to draw down the fund reserve, so it will eliminate the need to draw down the fund reserve, and we would be able to add $2.172 million to the fund balance. So that puts us back on that trajectory, back up to where we talked about, that 15% maybe climbs to 16 or 17%, and we decrease that other negative number on the other slide. And if 15% were implemented, the increase would generate an additional $17 million, which will circumvent the need to draw down the fund reserve again, but it'll add an additional $7.8 million, which is greatly needed to ensure the city can operate in an emergency. Again, one, it'll increase the fund balance on the one side and decrease that negative fund balance on the other, because we're tackling some of those issues related to unfunded liabilities, such as the pension. And the pension one really is the majority of the lion's share of that. Okay. So our recommendations are, staff is looking at making the recommendation of 15% for optimal service delivery. And we can go down the list, council and mayor, of what you guys recommend or you think we should do, but 15% is our recommended. We can get by with 7.5%, but as you just were well aware, it will continue to draw down that fund balance and put us in a position where we don't want to be moving forward. I don't and did not want to make any of these recommendations to you. As I understand, inflation affects everybody, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you what our position is and where we're at. And with that, that gets us through the revenue portion of the presentation. We can move into the budget book if you want, or we can start to look at the fees and charges and answer any questions before we move into fees and charges.
And the one thing I will say is that I would greatly encourage you to do more, do more than the 7.5%. Because really all we're doing by doing 7.5% is delaying a huge rate increase sometime in the future. At some point in the future, we're going to have to start making up these funds. If we start it now and start making them up a little bit at a time, that means it's going to have less of an impact on the citizens in future years.
Joe,
Okay.
what would the effect be on the average water bill?
Okay. Oh, and I got something for you. I kind of predicted this question would come up.
If for a customer that uses 2,000 gallons, they'd see at 7.5%, they're going to see about a $5.49 increase in their water bills. At 10%, it'd be $6.77, and at 15%, it would be $9.33. For a customer that uses 5,000 gallons, they'd be looking at a $7.22 increase at 7.5, $8.45 at 10, $11.88 at 15. For the citizens with the senior disability discounts, it would be $4.17 increase on 7.5, $5.07 at 10, and $6.86 at 15.
So I figured that question was asked, so I went ahead and put that together for your information. Now, you'll notice that there is a charge on there, and we will get to that in the fee schedule. We can talk about it now, or we can talk about it in the fee schedule. I'd assume we wait till the fee schedule because there's a lot to cover. But if you look at down there, you'll see the wastewater treatment plant debt service. And we had talked about that in the past, and when we get to that part of the fee schedule, please, and if I skip it or miss it, please remind me and we'll talk about it, but because I don't want to miss it. So we took the fees, we met with the...
Excuse me a second. I did have one question or a comment about revenue. A lot of times when we discuss revenue, we usually just discuss the water bill that the citizens are paying, but there's other people that, when we talk about these rates, there's other corporate, industrial, other people that we actually make revenue off of to pay for the city services besides just the citizens. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
That is correct. You have a lot of large water consumers out there. In the industrial park, for example, we have a large consumer in water as far as Fort Sill goes, and then we have waste accounts for trash and hauling that are also, we have some commercial accounts there, and we have some just straight up solid waste landfill accounts that don't even affect the utility bill, for example.
Do you know the percentage of between the citizens and these other entities that we're getting that revenue from?
I do not know, but we can get you the answer for that. If you recall, the pie chart is 28% for all revenues, but I don't have it split out. So
right, some of that stuff is like miscellaneous, or it was grouped.
We'll get you an answer for.
I'll get you that answer. They will be all of the customers that contribute toward utilities, which would be industrial, residential, commercial, are lumped into the 28% of service fees that we receive, charges for services.
Okay.
So that can be broken out by class.
Yeah, I know it takes a little work. In view of the citizens, on the citizens' behalf, I think it's all but fair for them to know and to be transparent with them that in the event that we do have to raise fees, that it's not just fees on them and they're not footing the burden of all of this. I mean, from my understanding, we're producing the water and footing most of the bill for not just the city of Lawton, but for a lot of outlying areas. And there's a lot of different ways you make money. I was down in Sarasota, Florida. They make a lot of money off of tourists. Yeah. There's a lot of other ways that other cities make revenue. But I just want to make sure that that we're kind of clear to the citizens that if we do have an increase, it's just not on them, but it is everybody in the area that is using city services and especially our water.
Kristen,
Yeah.
can you?
And
Thank you.
as you'll see, as we go through the fees and charges here in a few minutes, we have increased every category. So it's not only just the utilities that are increasing, it is building permits. It is anything that we can legally increase. I mean, we can't legally increase without a vote of the people, sales tax, hotel motel taxes, that area. But anything we can legally increase, we have increased.
And just one note there, because as usual, I'm trying to make things more difficult. We've figured in this fee schedule we've got here an increase of 7.5%.
That is correct.
And it would be my recommendation when this committee meets again, my recommendation would be that we increase these fees by the same amount that the council increases the utility rates, if not more, but definitely not less.
Well, and also to that point, Councilperson, the utility rates are a part of this fees and charges packet.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we are, and the whole purpose of that committee was that the fees that we charge for, and I call them ancillary services, they're not water, they're not sewage, they're not garbage, they're getting a permit to build a house, getting a whatever that is, that those fees, we get as close to covering the cost of providing that service as possible so that the rest of the citizenry doesn't have to subsidize that.
So with that in mind, if you don't, it's the pleasure of the council, move toward the Appendix A, the fees and charges. Most cities do it this way. They'll look at all the fees and charges at one time. And this is what I've asked staff to do, so we went and made the changes. And I'd like to give you an example of one thing that I thought was a little skewed, and we made the adjustment. If you look at the bottom of page 1, where it says agenda packet, council boards, commissions with supporting documents, right? And then they're underlined under there. Agenda is available online for no cost. However, if you go to the next page, it shows that the packet, if you want an annual subscription, that means you want a copy like this. You want one of these every time. You want a paper copy. It's $215 with the adjusted CPI. Well, if you divide that by the number of council meetings we had, and let's just use 2 a month or 24, that works out to $8.96 a book, right? But we were charging 25 cents. Now, that's not even the same amount that we were charging for a single page. If you use the single page amount at 27 cents and it's 100 pages, it's a $27 book. So it's just things like that that kind of made common sense, right? If you want a book, we'll print you a book. We don't have a problem doing that. We just got to cover our cost to print the book. But now we have the capability for it to be online. So if you want it online, it's no cost at all. That's just an example of some of the process we looked. But if you go down the list, if you see anything in there that's out of ordinary, we did remove, for example, electrostatic and use a term today that's called copy or reprint. We did eliminate blue line and microfilm sepia. We don't even produce those anymore, so that was the last time that was updated. And then if you look at the bottom of this page, and to tell you how last time it was updated was LMAPC, which is the Lawton Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, which is now a new organization, but that was what it was called then, and it's not even in existence. So we struck through that because it's not even applicable, okay? But if you go down through the list, and I don't need to read all these out to you, I'd like to get to the parts where there's some questions, right? Or we had some questions on the committee. And Mr. Warren, I believe that was related to permit fees or business license fees for medical marijuana establishments, right? So I'd like to go to that one, and then I would like to move on to the water ones after that. The rest of these were pretty much, I can't guarantee 100%, but they were all adjusted by the CPI of 7.5%, okay? Where is that at? Rabies, animals.
You're talking about chapter 7?
I think it's medical general business license, okay. I'll get it in a second. It's like 600, 600. Okay, so it'll be on page 13. There was a question, the committee asked the question, and I think rightfully so, why this amount? As you see here, this was the number that we added in. 650 wasn't even there before, but this was the change, the first change that we had made. So I guess we should have had 0 and then had line through of 650 and then the increase to 698 for the CPI. However, I will tell you that staff has done research and looked at these fees, these permit fees or business license fees in this case, and these are very much in line with cities like Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City's fees, Charlotte, am I correct in saying that they're very much in line with these fees? Okay. Okay. So these fees were copied off of Norman's fees. We were, prior to this, charging $0 for this. And not that it's the same, because I believe in the state of Oklahoma, OMMA looks at medical marijuana facilities as dispensaries, but the DEA on the Fed side does not look at medical marijuana facilities as dispensaries. We charge, for example, a license or a liquor store $950 for a license or a permit, right, license permit. We charge here what is in line with other municipalities, and this is why we added this to it. It would be a new fee in this case, wasn't there before. Is there any questions on a medical marijuana fee, at least a permit fee for that? Okay. All right, and let's move on to, and the rest of these, well, one of the things I will tell you, I think was pretty interesting as I was going through this, and I did go through the majority of this stuff, verifying it all. I spoke with our code enforcement operator, manager Corey Bowen. I said, Corey, did you know you're supposed to be inspecting and or they're supposed to get a permit for a pool table? We have those in our code. Each pool table, billiard table, snooker table, license fee annual is $21.50. Now, I did not know that, so it's good that we go through this, but I found that we're supposed to do that. And coin-operated devices and entertainment amusement centers. I just thought it was interesting because it's good to go through these things and look at these codes because you see things that may need to be adjusted or just downright not even applicable anymore, okay?
Well, Michael, if you would have been here in the early 60s, the city made a lot of money on pool tables and amusement.
Well, there's still a few pool tables around. Still a few around, but not as many as they were before. Okay. We did add, if you go to turn to page 19, this would be a new one where we added, well, it was bed and breakfast before, but we changed that title, or recommend changing that title to hotel, motels, and all other short-term rentals. And you see here, we added hotel, motels, and other short-term rental establishments licensing annual, $161, because it did not capture short-term rentals before. This will allow us to pursue that short-term rental that we talked about, VRBOs, Airbnbs, that type of thing. So that was that title was changed to better encapsulate those short-term rentals. Sir.
How long's it been since we've gone through this? Before this time?
Well, I found
2012
updates as far back as last time it was updated 2008 in some areas, 2012 in others.
So 10 to 15 years we didn't go up any, and now we're going to go up 8% or something?
Well, 7.5%.
It sounds to me like we've kind of left 15 years of inflation, which I know it wasn't 8%, thank goodness. Yeah. But on some of these, I wonder if we're even charged up. I'm going to call your attention to page 2.
Okay. Can you track these because I don't have a pen?
60% of the way down. Call for service research fee, $7 per half hour. Can we do that with the cost of employment of an individual?
That one is actually a new fee that was just added with this rendition, and that is the recommended price. That would be
so is it costing us more than $7 to deliver the fee? And I'm not talking about the employee's cost, because we pay another 30% on top of their wages for other employment fees. Can we deliver that fee for $7 for half hour?
Let me do the math. No.
No.
And why-
Easy answer is
then-
no.
Okay, thank you. Why, and my question has to be, why did we price it like that?
I think that, that was recommended, by the police department, and it was, in line with other communities our size.
I still don't get it. I mean, it seems to me like we have to charge what it costs to deliver the service, or we're subsidizing it from broken water lines
Yeah.
that aren't being repaired.
It's about, on a $56,000 salary, which is in our average salary with benefits, it'll be $13.50 for half an hour.
Is that with benefits?
That's with benefits. And it's approximate numbers, but, you know.
But, yeah, and. a
So
lot of
really, that one just stood out to me,
Yeah.
something for you to look at. You know, personally, I'm going to go with your recommendation, but I think that we're looking at this wrong. I think you've got to charge what it costs to deliver, or it's being supplemented for something else. And I think that kind of approach is why we can't fix these water leaks all over town, et cetera. And I think we got to charge what it costs to deliver the service.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for that. We'll go back and take a look at those. This fee structure was based upon, at least right now, the initial fee structure was based upon recommendations from the committee. They asked us to look at a 7.5% increase. We do need to go back and look at the cost of goods for that. I'll give you a primary example. You see notary fee down at the bottom. It's an underline. That's an addition. We charge $0 for notary fees. $0. You could come to the city and get a notary for $0, and that doesn't cover the cost for our training, nor the time for anybody to go and do that. So that is a catch, and $5 is about probably, for as long as it takes to do a notary, probably appropriate. But I will go back and look at that fee for call for service, research, and things of that nature.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, I think we've had inflation for 15 years that we haven't added to this.
Yes.
And now we're going to add inflation for 1 year.
Right.
And
Well,
so
also-
that's just my opinion. I don't know where everybody else is, but
Well, I would say that right now, our ordinance allows us to add for the CPI that was in effect on December of the previous year. So December 31, 2021 is the year we have to use as a benchmark according to our ordinances and resolutions. I'm recommending at this time we do 15%, not 7.5% as it's figured here.
But this is what we were asked to look at, and we can go back and adjust those. And as a matter of fact, I think your fee committee mayor made the recommendation that every fee be adjusted annually by the CPI.
Yes.
and no recommendation was made to catch up for the 15 years we didn't.
Not as of yet. We just took a snapshot from what it was right here in front of us and then added 7.5, and we can go back and look at those. It's not that, it does take a little bit of time, but this is the first time we've ever looked at the fee schedule holistically.
Some of these have been looked at piecemeal over the years, whereas, you know, like 1 year, we might have looked at animal services and raised those, but never, as long as I've been here, we've never done the whole fee structure.
When I subsidize some of my apartments, if I think there's somebody in need, I certainly tell my wife that I'm subsidizing it. And the reason I bring that point up, I just want to say this about what the mayor said. You know, citizens are who we are all kind of being responsible to, and I think it'd be good for them to know that we're subsidizing and that we're trying to work our way out of it, and then that helps them to understand, and maybe to be more lenient on paying a little bit more for us to get out of the mess that we are in. And just as a side note, and Michael, I know you're not a notary. I'm a notary, and by law you can't charge more than $5 for a notary.
That's why we set it for $5.
But it's more $5 than what we're getting. But on the side of inflation, I'm just kind of throwing that out there for the mayor. I wish I could get paid more for notarizing.
Councilman Warren is correct. We have addressed them piecemeal over the years. I mean, I'm looking back. If you'll look through the fees underneath each section, it tells you when it was last updated. And just doing a brief scan through this, sitting here at the table, I see some dating back as far as 1995, but some as most recent as 2021.
On these fees, I don't see how we could possibly charge the citizens 15% on the other side, but not charge the same increase on the fees.
And I think,
Like what he said earlier, and if maybe we need to start looking at this, we'll do 15% on our fees or what's appropriate to pay for the service, and then see if we really need to charge 15% to the water customers.
Well, and I would recommend that, like I say, my recommendation would still be that we look at 15% for every fee and service that we have, including utilities.
and I think if, at the time that the committee met, had we known the rate that inflation was increasing, we probably would have went ahead and jumped to the 15 right then. But I would agree. I think Councilman Fortenbaugh is right. I think that we need to do these fees excluding utilities first, see what that total is. I'm sure we're still going to have to, I didn't know whether to talk about this now or later, but the problem with inflation is we're not going to wake up on February the 1st of next year and everything's going to be back to normal. It's going to work on a bell curve, or hopefully not a bell curve. Hopefully it'll be a speed bump curve. But it's going to take 18 months for things to start straightening back out. So if we don't seriously look at that 10 or 15%, we're going to be right back here again next year and the year after that, and have to go even further, because we'll be even further behind next year than we are now.
But what we're talking about here is trying to balance a budget, and I do think equity, and I think that's what we're talking about here, is equity with all the payers, and not just have the citizens pay it on the water bill. Because
one of the things I'd like to mention too, you mentioned doing increases on everything excluding utilities, and I understand that, but we've got to have some increases in utilities this year also.
Yeah, we weren't talking about we're talking about equity here.
Well, I thought I heard it differently.
So we'll go back and we'll look at what council asked us to do. We'll break out that 28%. We'll make the adjustments to the fee schedule at 15%. And then we'll look at whether or not utility fees need to move from 7.5 to 15 or stay at 7.5. But I think there's going to be somewhere in between there, to be honest with you. If you guys want to go through the rest of the fee schedule, it's a bunch of fees and stuff. We're already at 1 hour and 15 minutes. I will tell you that they're all been adjusted by 7.5. We need to go back and look at a few of them, and I'll have staff do that and adjust ones that are accordingly. Mayor, thank you for pointing that out. Council, thank you for your questions related to that. We'll have them addressed on what it costs for our services. And it's important. And I'll tell you, one of the things reason I think it's important is we've had a very difficult time, and we'll get into this more in personnel, trying to get contracts for a veterinarian, for example. And I want to put that in perspective. We take in more animals in our shelter than any city in the state of Oklahoma. As a matter of fact, I think we take in more animals than most of the metropolitan area of Oklahoma City combined. We take in 6,000 animals a year. The next closest one, I believe, is Broken Arrow. Is that right, Dwayne? At about 900 animals a year. So we take in exponentially more animals. Well, for those animals to be adoptable, and we want them to be adoptable, right? We want them to be adopted out to families. We have to be able to spay and neuter those and vaccinate those pets. And this is just an example, right? We had to struggle to get enough applicants from our vets around, because they're busy too, to come in and give us 10 hours or so a week so we can perform all the surgeries necessary. We've even considered making a recommendation of hiring a veterinarian just to get through all this stuff, because what we're paying in fees, contractor fees for that, we could almost pay for a vet, and then we'd have a vet on staff. So that's the stuff that staff has been looking at to make what makes sense. Mayor, I agree with you. A lot of times outsourcing is the best way to do it, but sometimes, depending if we can't get anybody, sometimes you got to have that person in-house, and then you have have operational control over them. So we'll look at all those things, like when it comes to vaccinating pets. Is it $15 or is the shot now $20 and we're charging $15? So we're going to look at all of those aspects. We'll adjust some of those provisions accordingly, but from what I hear is we're going to adjust everything up to 15% on the fee schedule. We'll leave the utility portion of it at 7.5 and adjust as necessary from going forward. At least right now, that's what I've heard. Is that correct? Okay. Well, that's our first year. That's our first budget meeting. The next time we'll be talking about a few other things. We'll talk about personnel in the next budget. Go ahead, Rich.
And just to clarify, some of the fees were raised substantially. They were not just the 7.5%, and you don't want those. Oh, sorry. Some of the fees were set by the cost to do service, so they weren't all just raised 7.5%. The ones that are set higher than that, we're not going to lower to 15%. We'll leave those where they're at. Right, okay.
Michael?
Sir.
There's just one, and I agree with everything else. There's just one fee that, and I hate to nitpick, but having gone down, having had my home broken into, having property stolen from my warehouse, then you're required by the insurance company to go down and get a police report. Mm-hmm. And they go, thank you very much, that'll be $1. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I got robbed twice. I think that's one of the things that, in our effort to be a kinder, gentler city, that's one fee that maybe could be waived, at least for the person that, not necessarily for businesses, but for the private person that's been offended. I've always felt we should work on that. I don't know how much of a huge cost that would be, but.
Well, Mr. Harris, I don't get to make that decision. I can make the adjustments to the schedule, and the rest of your fellow
right.
council members get to make that decision. I see your point, but when paper costs what it's costing today and staff time, $1 is probably not a bad fee, and maybe that's not even
and
the
I
right
get
fee.
look, I get that. I really do. It's just at a time when you've been kind of offended already, then you come down and it's insult to injury.
Right, I understand.
I'd like to compliment the schedule.
Yes.
I like the way this is working. I like the way this first meeting is going. So.
Well, appreciate that, and that's how we'll try to do it in the future. You can probably expect a longer meeting when it gets to the capital budget, and what I mean by that is, you can look through the budget and you'll see that we've captured what we expect to receive in revenue for the capital sales tax, and plus what we have in the bank. But what we've had to do is work with our staff to get that module, that project module, put together so we can rack and stack those, as I like to call it, against what we have available, and then push that out. And I'll give you an example why that's important. Does everybody recall the Cash Road Waterline project that we talked about, I don't know, 5-6 months ago? I think the number was $11 or $12 million. Everybody remember that? Well, the cost to do that project now is $25 million. So when we talk about inflation, that's what we're talking about. And why that's important is because there may be other projects, when we get this list up, that $25 million trumps, so to speak, and they get pushed out or pushed to the next year. And you got to have that information as elected officials. You need to know that this is how much money we have, whether we borrow it or we have it cash funded, that we have available to spend, and that we need to make some decisions. That's our job, is to get that product to you. I've been working with our engineers and Rich and Garber Engineering to get that project finished. I think we're close, and hopefully we will have that for the meeting in that third meeting. If not, what you'll be voting on is the capital dollars in there, the capital amount that we expect to collect, and we will bring that back at the soonest opportunity if we don't meet that date, so you can project and prioritize and then approve those capital budgets. Because just as we have the dollars doesn't mean we're going to have to spend them, but we can bring those back and get y'all's approval on the recommended projects, and we'll start that process. And it'll be a completely different process than what we've done in the past. So just be prepared for that, and it'll probably be a little bit longer meeting.
Ms. Johnson, you have a question?
Yes. Question/statement. I'm just going back to the fees real quickly. I know that we just did some adjustments with the trash pickup and taking away services and increasing the cost. So is there a way that we can look at not touching that right now, in the fee increase, Because I believe I asked the question before if we had started saving money because that was the goal. Is that something that we can look at?
And Ms. Johnson, to answer your question off the top of my head, I would say I don't know if that would be a likely scenario in the case because trucks have increased in price when we started buying those every year, 7.5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. Cart prices are up extraordinarily. Wages in solid waste were up. So what we were able to do with those savings is really pay our workers more money to maintain workers. In this case, for workers, for solid waste, on average, about $14, $18, or $15. I think they're making in excess of $18, almost $19 an hour. So those savings were absorbed in the aspect of increased fuel prices, increased equipment costs, increased trash carts, and wages. So I don't think so, but we'll look at it.
Any other questions, comments, motions for adjournment? Heard a motion. Did I hear a second?
Second.
And a second. Please call the roll.
Harris.
Yes.
Chapman. Hampton. Fortenbaugh. Johnson. Warren. Hankins.